Hello, everyone. Stuart Gandalf back again today with another podcast. And today I'm just like scoring lately on the guest. It's like I've always had good guests, but lately it's been particularly good. So today I'm introducing to you Wendy Suljak, whom I met at a medical device conference. And, I thought of the presenters at that conference, I thought she was one of the better ones. So I invited her to join me and you on the podcast today. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you, Stuart. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to it. So, Wendy, by the way, is Associate Vice President of Consumer and Practice Marketing for NeuroStar, which is a company we're familiar with. We do a lot in the TMS space. And so this topic is more broad. And so the topic that she's going to cover today, and she's going to do something a little different today. She's going to do a shortened version of her presentation from the meeting, swimming with influencers on social media. So with that, Wendy, I'd love you just to sort of walk us through the presentation you shared with me, and I'll add color commentary and hopefully fun, interesting comments along the way.
Yeah, no, I love it. And so I'm going to share my slide deck while we go through it. We'll talk about the content on the slide, but we'll also, answer questions that you might have or dive deeper as you will.
Absolutely. And by the way, for the audio listeners who will make up most people, we'll still talk about what's on the slide. So it's not a big handicap. If you want to go back and see the recording on YouTube, you can, but we'll make sure we talk these points through so that it works for the people that are listening in. So great, Wendy, let's get started.
Yeah, great. All right. So some fun facts about me. Realistically, you're probably listening to this on the podcast, so you won't be able to see this. But so I thought it might be some interesting to share some of these fun facts. One, my mom didn't want me to go to business school. I ended up in marketing and in business. I actually in business school realized that I love peanut M&Ms. And I love product management, so I wanted to be a peanut M&M product manager, but I ended up in medical devices, and so because of my degree in biology, and I went from marketing to sales, and then back into marketing. So I had the full commercial experience, and with 20 years of medical device marketing, I like to say that I've worked on all the important organs. I've worked on lungs, the heart, skin, fat, and brain. So now I'm here at NeuroStar working on brain type things.
By the way, I love peanut M&Ms too. That's really funny. I like those and the mini Cadbury eggs that come around at Christmas, not the big ones, the little ones that are kind of like that size. So that's really funny.
Yeah,
By the way,
yeah.
For those of you that are listening, Wendy's worked on some brands that we're very familiar with at our company. I mentioned NeuroStar, but also Covidian, Cool Sculpting as a brand, Allergan, and some others. So she's got some great experience. Go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah, for sure. So my question for the audience really usually starts with, have you ever used a social media influencer for your brand? And many of the conferences that Stuart and I go to are medical conferences or medical device conferences. And most of them say, well, actually, no, I haven't used a social media influencer. Stuart, have you also found the same in your conferences?
Yeah, it's really interesting. This has gone from zero interest to increasing interest really quickly, but most people still haven't. And it's funny because we've done a couple of, in the, 20 years almost, we've been a company. We never did social influencer topics once up until like the last, say, 6 or 8 months where there's increasing interest. So it's a huge, you're at the, I think it's been around obviously, but in healthcare, you're kind of at the forefront, Wendy.
Yeah, we're at the forefront. We had a lot of colleagues who say, I want to work with influencers, but I just don't know how, right? And so that's where this whole topic kind of came together. So the topics that we'll discuss here are, about the rise of influencers. Who are the ideal influencers for a medical device brand or medical brand? How to recruit influencers, and then some case studies that I'll be presenting from my own experience, and then some tips and tricks I learned along the way that I'd like to share with folks too, because we do come in a regulated environment. It's not like, we're influencer for cosmetics, for example. We are in the medical space, so we have different rules. So I'll first talk about the rise of influencers, and I think everybody understands how important influencers are in our social media world today. It is one of the fastest growing channels for customer acquisition. And in general, businesses are making about $7 for every $1 spent on influencer marketing. So it's not a surprise that it's a big source of interest for folks. On the consumer side, 70% of consumers trust micro influencers more than they trust celebrities. Why? Because it's relatable. People connect with influencers who share their interests, even small influencers, struggles, lifestyle, the aspirational content that we are looking for. We want to get inspired to see what's possible and to dream big. And then there's authenticity, which is the secret sauce, right? Audiences, social media audiences today crave genuine, unfiltered moments. It doesn't have to be super stylized. It's just an everyday person, just like me. So, no matter what you do as a brand, you can only tell it so many times through ads, through commercials, before it becomes noise. And where influencers come into play is you really need someone else, an average person, to advocate for you. Now, the funny thing is everyone thinks they're an influencer. And they'll tell you what platforms they are most active in. I was with a mom group recently, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm an influencer." I'm like, "Okay, well, let's start there." Where people, if they think they're an influencer, where are they? Right? The top 5 platforms for influencers are Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, X. That platform.
That's it. Yeah.
The thing is, most of the time people are like, I need to be on TikTok. I'm an influencer if I'm on TikTok. I've got millions of followers. My video went viral. But most influencers, if you talk to them, the platform that works the most for them and works the best for them is the Instagram platform. So 93% of influencers are on Instagram. And these are the
That insight's really important, I think,
yeah.
Wendy, because so often people get overwhelmed before they even start, right? Like to try to
Yeah.
cover every possible channel. What about LinkedIn? What about Reddit? Like, whoa, 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 whoa. We haven't gotten started yet. Like, let's start with the most important. So I think that's an important insight. Thank you. Continue.
Yeah, no, and to that point, I talk about X as being one of our top 5 platforms, but Blue Sky is coming out, and that's a brand new platform. And we've got colleagues and friends who are saying, like, should I ditch my X account for a Blue Sky account? And I always go back to the same thing. I say, find the platforms that work best for you and work on those before you go and start different platforms, and spend a lot of time and energy doing that. So if you're going to work with influencers, find the influencers who work on the top 2 platforms, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I include with Instagram at the same time because it's really meta altogether. And I'd say spend your time finding influencers who are present on those platforms, because that's where the consumers are.
Yep. And I love your tiers of influencers here. Let's talk about that just for a moment.
Yeah. There's lots of different tiers of influencers here. So there's 5 different tiers, all the way from nano, which is 1 to 10,000 followers, micro influencers, 10 to 100K, mid tier, and then macro, and then mega. Mega are like your celebrity status influencers. But the reason why I put these tiers here is so that we can all understand, let's say if I have a low budget, I'm probably not going to be able to afford a celebrity status. I probably want to work with nano influencers. So that helps define the group that you're looking for. Now, if you're looking to do an awareness campaign, looking for nano influencers isn't going to get you very far on an awareness campaign. You want somebody who's a mid-tier or macro or a mega influencer. So you want to aim towards people with over 100,000 followers if you're going to build an awareness campaign. No sense in doing an awareness campaign with nano influencers who generally have about 1 to 10,000 followers, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and this will play out in a little bit as we go further and discuss more. Remember when I said, Stuart, that everybody says they're an influencer nowadays. Well, being an influencer is a legit career. I tell this story because I was at my kid's second grade class, and they had to make a little poster of what they want to be when they grow up. My kid says, I want to be a scientist, and I love dinosaurs, right? Typical second grade things. There's another second grade, but there are actually a few second graders in his class who said they want to be an influencer when they grow up, a YouTube influencer.
And so it's so funny. My friend of mine's a neuroscientist, and he's, dean of neurobiology over at UCI, University of California, Irvine. And these are all bio kids, super smart kids getting in there. And a lot of them would rather be an influencer.
Yeah, I know, right? And so we talk about this. Well, does an influencer really pay? And the average salary for an influencer is somewhere between $41,000 to $91,000. That doesn't include residuals, which is the commissions that some would make for, if you were to go on Amazon and buy something from one of their links, they get residuals from it. So it is a legit career now, and that's why it's important to have this conversation and trying to find the right influence for you, because you can get matched or you can hire an influencer. Now it's about who are you looking for. So that actually leads us into our next section. Who is your ideal influencer and why? Right. I always like to say, start with the goal. Is your goal physician acceptance? Is it treatment validity? Is it consumer awareness? Do you notoriety, perhaps? Make a big splash, or is it goodwill? And, if it's a physician, for example, you want to find a physician, KOL influencers have a general belief that they're the authority figure. So my opinion matters. A former patient or therapy advocate are saying things like, I'm doing this to help others like me. And then a celebrity person says that I'm here for my fans. So they want to engage and do things, partner with brands that help their fans. And so the sweet spot for many of us in the healthcare space is actually somewhere in the nano and micro influencer level. And why do I say that's a sweet spot? It's often because cost has a lot to do with it. And also the people that we're trying to target are more localized or regionalized or have a specific source of interest. For example, at NeuroStar, we're looking at people who are affected by mental health conditions like depression or OCD. So it's a very niche market. So we're probably aiming towards these, bottom two. So influencer engagement is typically also measured by folks with, content that has an impact on their influencer earnings. Followers is not always indicative of engagement. So here's two examples. One person who's called It's Liv B, her engagement rate is 1.4%. Kim Kardashian, on the other hand, has 0.4%. So a lot less. However, Kim Kardashian has 334 million followers. I'm sure it's grown since the time I put together this presentation. Liv only has 121,000. So a very, very big difference. And then you could see that engagement level and the followers play into their cost per post. And so let's talk about what those fees are.
That's amazing. 334 million is like the population in the United States.
Right? I know. I mean, it probably is like everyone in the United States is following her at some point.
Gosh,
But
that's amazing.
it is a worldwide figure, yeah. Fees, stories, posts, reposts are all dollars. They're all, a way for an influencer to make money, right? And that cost is an ever-changing landscape. And the pricing will continue to change as the perceived value of an influencer continues to increase. So if you were to do like 4 influencers, right? For one post, $500 each, one story, let's say $500 each, that's $4,000. but it's not really the price of that $4,000. So you can say that that's very inexpensive, but it's the biggest hindrance is actually the marketer's time to review all that content and also that influencer management, because it is like hand holding, um, like a celebrity almost, and they're putting together their content, you're helping them. They're not a subject matter expert. So you really need to be in there to help them create their content in a way that is going to meet your business needs.
That's great. Wendy, I have a quick question for you because
Yeah.
there's a lot of data on your slides. Would it be okay if we link out to your deck on our post so that
Yeah.
people want to come back? Because there may be some A students listening to the audio here that want to come back and see it. So for those of you then that if you're interested in this topic and want to go back and you listen to it, you want to go back to the slides, it'll be available on healthcaresuccess.com. Just go to the search bar, look up Wendy's name, and you can find the actual slides. So great. Thank you, Wendy, because I
Yeah, no,
think it'd be
absolutely.
fun to include the deck on the post.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
yeah,
Well, and then so as I mentioned before earlier, finding ideal influencers for medical devices it can be tricky, right? Because a lot of times our medical devices are in a niche environment. So, it could be an actual patient or a caregiver, or it could be a therapy advocate who can identify with your product. And we'll show some of these later and we talk about the case studies. Here's an actual patient. Kristen is an influencer that who we are working with. She is a former NeuroStar patient. Her treatment was not sponsored, just in case anybody is interested. She is also a mental health therapist. She has 235,000 followers. In a with Meltwater, you can actually see what Meltwater would estimate Kristen's pricing at, so, they estimate her story based on her engagement level, number of followers is $926. She is used to collaborating. She's got a media kit. And as I mentioned, her media kit states that the cost to work with her for a story or a story video is $1,000 to $1,500. So it's very consistent with what Meltwater has estimated. Here's a therapy advocate example that we worked with. My colleague, worked with our PR agency to work with Kyle Richards. Kyle Richards did not have Sientra implants. However, she had a personal story. Her mother had breast cancer, and she saw how much that impacted her. So that therapy advocate was the tie-in to our brand, and of course the Full Circle program, which is it's a it is a first nationwide program to provide no-cost breast reconstructive surgery for patients who can't afford to have breast reconstructive surgery. So she put her stamp behind that. The next section I'm going to talk about is how to recruit patients. There's two easy ways you can do it. One is to organically have people self-apply. You could set up like a Google sheet or a similar form that collects that information, and then that allows you to reach out to them, and you can add it to your social media profile or one of the links on your Instagram. Another way, for example, how we found Kristen was she tagged us in her content. And you could this is a snapshot of our Instagram profile. Every now and then we looked at the tagged posts part, and she tagged us in a video that she used. And so that's one of the ways that you could find an influencer who's already familiar with your brand. That cuts down on a lot of time. There are other ways to recruit. Our agency mines Instagram, but also partners with an influencer headhunter. Their pricing is about $1,200 and then 20% of the cost when influencers post. You could do a casting call post on social, friends and family. Like I mentioned, you can have an influencer platform that you can engage with. You could also use a PR agency, but generally the PR agencies are working, it's big money. So they're the ones finding like the celebrities for you or those mega influencers who are really going to move your brand forward from an awareness perspective.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting too, like with you guys at NeuroStar, and if you could give like maybe a 30-second plug on what you guys do, just because the audience may not know,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot of engagement based upon the kinds of work that you guys do.
I'm sorry, say it again.
I was just saying, so TMS is a therapy. I'll just jump in. So TMS is a therapy, if you're not familiar with it, that is really revolutionizing psychotherapy, particularly with depression and OCD. There's other uses that are sort of off-label. And so the nature of what you guys are doing, though, I can see why influencers are naturally coming to you because it's the kind of topic that people are, it's life debilitating. If they feel like they're getting a solution to a problem, they feel like others do, it's like it's just something they feel comfortable going public about. I mean, there's, probably people aren't going to be super big about talking about their venereal disease and on, as an influencer, but depression is something that is so debilitating. And if you guys are helping, it's sort of what's the right words I'm using? It's like it would appeal to a lot of people. I think most people would know that. It's
Absolutely.
so debilitating. So you guys are really in a good sweet spot for that. It's like doing some obscure urological device might be harder, but for you guys, I could see it really working well. And
Yeah.
Celia, you guys are able to tag, people are tagging you on their own, which is awesome because then it's
Yeah.
very, there's no sort of BS there. And I think all these other methods are great. It's funny because like it is a specialty. There's various platforms to find influencers, and it's a whole thing. And I'm sure you'll be talking about this more, but the organic side of looking to your own patients and looking to people that are already following you, if that's an option, is great. So cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, NeuroStar is really amazing. I mean, from the perspective that over 20 million Americans suffer from depression, right? And the previously a lot of the options are drugs, therapy, talk therapy, for example, ECT. But now there's finally a therapy, TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, where it's a non-drug, non-invasive approach with long-term results to depression. So that's one thing that, drugs, they help to um, help with the symptoms, but it's not a long-term solution. And it's one of the great things that I find very fulfilling about working in medical devices is actually helping patients get connected to innovative technologies that can help, improve their condition. And NeuroStar is one of them, of course. Um, the thing that with all these technologies that I've worked with, it's actually just awareness. It's about utilizing these tools in your tool belt, like influencers, to help spread the word. Because you might have the coolest device out there, but if nobody knows about it, how many people are you really helping, right? So our job as marketers is to help bring that forward.
Yep. Awesome. Okay, great.
Yeah. So some case studies. We'll end with some case studies here, fun case studies. At NeuroStar, in the last year, we've seen 2,200 followers, increased follower growth on our Instagram platform. A lot of it was due to two influencer partners that we did for National Depression Awareness Month. You mentioned, or you heard me mention about Kristen. We certainly had a lot of likes through that. We also partnered with Jamie Mahler, who is another therapist who also got the NeuroStar treatment, not sponsored treatment. And so between their two follower groups, we've been able to reach over, 300,000, nearly 400,000 people. So, working with influencers is a different tool in our tool belt rather than just Google and Meta advertising, right? Mirror Dry is another sweat is a sweat reduction product. It's a non-surgical sweat reduction product that helps permanently reduce underarm sweat and odor. When I worked on the brand, we had 4 million visits. We had 4 times follower growth, and we did a lot of it through influencers. We started first with Joey Gorga, Real Housewives, and so we spent some fair amount of money, but we also found other ways to work with other influencers that were less expensive, but certainly also had a very good range of results. Then there's Amber McLean, who's a race car driver, and Lindley Poston, Raven Gates, Gia, who was actually ironically the niece of Joey Gorga. She got the treatment and then was subsequently featured in People magazine. So it helped really, affirm that MiraDry can be, is frequently used for a lot of people too. And then I always like to joke that my crowning achievement, of course, was when Lance Bass's talent agent called us and said, Lance Bass is interested in the MiraDry treatment. I was, it's got to be a prank. I mean, Stuart, if Lance Bass's talent agent called you, he'd be like, okay, who put you up to this, right? But he truly did. He and his husband, went and got a MiraDry treatment. Lance Bass has over 1 million followers, and that post had over 10,000 likes.
Awesome.
So, Sientra, when we worked on that implant brand, we saw 2x follower growth. We went from nobody tagging us to working with a lot of different user-generated content, and it was cheaper than going to advertise with lots of celebrity folks. But we were able to measure ROI through a rebate program. Each influencer had a custom referral link, and then the Google Analytics side of the website tracked the engagement time once they came to our website, any searches, any patient interest that we then passed on to Sientra surgeons. And so that kind of leads me to our final thoughts here. How do we work with influencers in medical devices? And as I alluded to at the beginning of the call, it is different. This was a recent, this happened in July, towards the end of July. The FDA called out Brittany Mahomes' post on Instagram. It was a sponsored post. It was false and misleading because it failed to include any risk information. So we never want to have that type of situation. Those are the situations where our regulatory department gets really nervous about. So some of the things that I would, recommend, and of course, talk with your regulatory department is you have to disclose #ad or #sponsored. That individual results may vary. Be upfront about what your indications are and what your important safety information is. And then we use MLR as the term, but it's legal, medical, and regulatory review of all content. That's really to keep us safe from situations, like this with the FDA. Other tips and tricks is looking at influencers on how they complement your existing strategies. Finding a connection or a theme, what's the connection? Can you wrap it into a campaign? So for us, 2 big moments in time is October, National Depression Awareness Month, or Mental Health Awareness Month, which is in May. So, how do you work in your influencers into those moments in time? Followers are great, but it's not everything. So engagement is a much better measurement stick. And also, MLR all content before you post. You want to make sure it's on brand, on label. And then last but not least, you want to make sure that there is a contract with your influencer. Nothing that is like, I'm just going to Venmo you some money if you could just make this post for me. I always make sure that there's a contract. I want to make sure that there's a very clear definition of usage rights, exclusivity. That's important too, because you don't want them posting about you and then somebody else the next day who might be a competitor. That dilutes your message. And if money is tight in your budget working with influencers, you can negotiate on usage rights, 1 month versus 2 months. Or exclusivity. You could say, I want you to be exclusive for 1 week and see how that changes, or as opposed to 6 months or a year. So, just think about all of those things as you put yourself into a contractual conversation with the influencer. And so, yeah, I do invite, Stuart, everybody, if anybody has questions, here's my contact information. I'd love to speak to anybody about this and
Awesome. I love
see how
that.
we could partner.
Good. So, Wendy, thank you. That was awesome. I have a couple quick questions for you. One is, I often hear people worry about just dealing with, any pool of humans, like personality is going to vary. And I think influencers, by definition, a lot of them at least, are going to be maybe on the more extroverted side. Sometimes I hear they're flakier, or sometimes some are easier to deal with than others. So, like, in that topic, any insights of like how to find something that you can work with or not, or maybe it's all worth it anyway, or like what are your thoughts there?
That's a great question. So before I jump into any influencer type engagement or contract, I have a meeting with them first. I want to know, are they going to be able to one book, like for example, book time on my calendar? Are they going to show up on time? Are they well versed? Do they speak? I look at their other content that they've done, whether it's for brands or for themselves, and I scrutinize all of that before I engage with them. I find that those are usually the best situation of how you can figure out whether or not you can work with them. Other influencers have a talent house. So I'm working with the talent house right now for an influencer. Talent house is based in Canada, but they really know their stuff. So they're very much, very, timeline driven. They organize everything for those are the best situations because there's somebody on the other end who's helping manage that. It's like their talent manager.
Got it. That makes sense. And then another question. Um, the one of the things I just was listening to something else the other day, and it was talking about make sure your contract has language about you being able to use the assets that come out of this for an extended period of time. Otherwise, like if it's just a post, then it comes and goes in seconds. But if you
Yeah,
have rights, so I'm curious, you're
yeah.
nodding your head here, but like it, just off the top of your head, it doesn't have to be everything but like what are the key terms you think should be in a contract? Like that would be one, I think, is like, how long is this, how can you use it? What can you do? What can you not do? Certainly are assets available, but anything else you think would be really important to negotiate as you're working with an influencer?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Obviously talk with your legal team about it. But what I usually throw out to, let's say, the talent house is I want to do X, right? I want it for 6 month exclusivity. And I always aim higher, right? I want 6 month exclusivity. I want 100 like usage rights in perpetuity. I want it to be a post where you're going to collaborate, tag me, like add our brand as a collaborator on your post. And then they tell you what the prices are for all of those things. Like I want a link in your story. Well, let's say for a link in the story, that's $500.
Yeah.
For 1 year of exclusivity, it's $1,000 for every month. I'm like, oh my God. So you think about all these things and then you look at your budget and you're like, okay, let's say my budget's $1,000. What is most important to me?
Yeah.
The things that I would guide somebody to look at is usage rights. You want to get it for as long as possible, like perpetuity, and if possible, and that you can advertise with that post or you can boost that post because that brings that post to more and more people, friends and family of both collaborators. I would also ask if you could you know uh, exclusivity to make sure that they're not posting a competitor of yours, but also that they're not posting immediately, maybe a day before and a day after you. Now that's
Okay.
important
Yeah.
because if they're posting 5 things on that day, of which you are just one of the 5 things, your content gets doesn't get seen by as many people, and people don't react to it as much because the algorithm isn't allowing it to focus on you. For example, if they're posting about your brand and then they post a really funny video afterwards, well, the funny video is probably going to get more likes.
That's
Your
great.
brand isn't going to get the
Yeah,
more.
that totally makes sense. Um, and then I guess the last question I would have for you, because this is common. All right, so you're the market, depending on the business, some marketing people have lots of esteem and a seat at the table, and other companies and other providers, they're kind of kicked to the kids' table. So they're not in the room where it happens. So if you're in that other category where you really need to sell your boss and you don't want to have them look at you like they've got 2 heads, because there might be like the common thing is fear, this is going to screw up our reputation, this is going to be expensive, it's not going to yield anything. Any tips for someone that's thinking about and trying to sell this internally?
Yeah, we were just in that same boat. We actually had a policy where we couldn't work with influencers. But one of the things we did was we worked ahead of time with our regulatory and legal partners to say, this is what we want to do. These are the goals around. So we made them partners as part of our overall goal. And they understand that influencers now are a way of life. And so they were very interested in helping us be part of that project. But we also looked for influencers that were a safe bet. So for example, working with Kristen and Jamie, looking at their content, they had produced content for quite some time. It wasn't their first time, wasn't their first rodeo. And they were very, as mental health providers, as healthcare providers, they understood that we have rules with the FDA that we have to, stay with. And so they were very, very keen on working with us. I think if I was a first time person, I would try to sell my boss on, if it's a $1,000 or $3,000 budget. So, and see if you could get that budget to be split amongst 2 influencers and use that as a pilot or learning opportunity and see how well they do before investing. We saw great success with Kristen and Jamie. And so, it was something that we've baked in now to our 2025 plan. But we did that in Q4 2024 as a proof of concept, not only to our boss, but also to ourselves. Can we do something like this? Can we execute on this? Do we feel comfortable and confident? If there were any red flags, how do we deal with it? Right. So, I definitely am a big fan of piloting first before you run.
It's great advice. So because that's very real, and I thought those tips were great. I love the idea of talking to compliance first. If you have that ear, because you took away the big objection, we can't do it because of compliance. They're going to tell you no before you even say get the words out. No,
Right.
no, we already talked to compliance, and then starting with some safe bets with a modest budget was great. And I think also I would just add from experience of doing this for so long, setting appropriate expectations. Like, what does success look like? Because we didn't get 700 leads from this. Like, well, it wasn't really the right expectation in the opening. Anyway, Wendy, you've been great. I knew you would be. This was fun. Some of the stuff we talked about here at the end was even more fun to me to like talk about the stuff between the lines. So great job. I'll make sure to put your LinkedIn profile on the post as well, so people can reach out to Wendy directly. Thank you for being here.
Of course, anytime. I've loved doing this. And thank you so much for inviting me.
All right, keep in touch.
All right. Thank you.